Hello, welcome to the channel. My name is Matt, this is Bask in the Story, and today we are finally doing our top 10 reads from 2023. I had to wait right till the end of the year because there were two books in December I was reading that. One did make the list and one kind of made the list. We'll come on to that in a minute, but so we're going to fly into the top 10. This is fiction reads, so there's no non-fiction, but there are a whole mess of genres because I read a mess of genres. So we've got sci-fi, crime, fantasy, horror, classics, literary fiction, a broad gamut of genres to get through. So will there be some controversy over what I've ranked where? Possibly, because I imagine there'll be other people's favourites on here that aren't ranked as highly as they thought or thought they should be. But this is my list, so tough. Moving on, there are no rereads, so these are all new to me books in 2023, and where there's a series, I'll probably show the series, but there'll just be one book that will be my favourite of that series as well. So I think that is pretty much all the rules, so let's just get into it. So one of the books that has snuck into the number 10 spot in December and was one of the books that I was holding off this top 10 for was Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is it is fantasy, but it's more historical fiction than fantasy. It's sort of historical fiction with a bit of fantasy, and we've got sort of the academic setting at Oxford University, and what R.F. Kuang's writing is superb in this book. She really puts you, or put me, in that academic setting. She really put me in that place in her writing. And what she also does wonderfully is there's a lot of etymology, so the meaning of words and where words come from in different languages and how they've developed from different languages, interwoven into the story, but it's interwoven so well. Now, if you're not a fan of etymology, which to be honest I am, then some of the bits in this will probably be a bit dry and stale for you. But for me, it was just a fascinating read. You know, the main character, Robin, is just a well-developed character who you can see shift from where he starts in the book to where he ends up in the book is just a remarkable transition. We've got, you know, some of the characters aren't as well developed as others, and one of the things that just let us down a little bit with some of the pacing was a bit wonky. We had some great start from me, and then we slowed down a bit, and we had a big ramp up, and then it slowed down and ramp up again. So it's a bit, the pacing's a bit dodgy. Writing is superb, story is superb, setting is so well developed. I enjoy the characters, I love the story. It's more historical fiction than fantasy, and the fantasy element isn't fully developed as much as some people may like. So the magic system, for a better word, isn't fully explained or fully developed, but it is explained enough to keep the story moving. I thoroughly enjoyed it. We did it as a buddy read on a Discord, and it was fascinating hearing other people's opinions and thoughts and sharing back and forth. It certainly helped probably improve where I put this in the list because of my experience reading it. But yeah, Babel by R.F. Kuang is number 10. In 9th place we have, so as if you've been watching the channel for a while, you will know that I have been reading through, for the first time, the Harry Potter series. And this year I've read books 3, 4, 5 and 6. So Prisoner of Azkaban, Order of the Phoenix, Goblet of Fire, and The Half-Blood Prince. I did that in the wrong order, but anyway. But my favourite so far is the one I read last, and that was Half-Blood Prince. As we go on, the stories have got darker and more sinister, and I've thoroughly enjoyed that. I think the characters have developed and are growing up, but still having that a bit of teenage angst, which I appreciate. She writes characters so well, and so engaged with them. And you know, this felt like certainly the most dramatic of the books we've read so far, with, you know, the biggest twists and turns, and we are now really into the main sort of Voldemort is out there and we're fighting back to save the world, really. It's just superbly written. I'm not going to say a huge amount about Harry Potter because I think I am one of the last people to read it, but actually I've been very, very impressed. The first two were a bit meh. To me, they were fine, but they weren't great. But it's developed better and better as I've gone through the series. And as I say, this one was the best one so far. So I've got one left, which is Deathly Hallows. I'm really looking forward to that, and that'll be 2024. We definitely finish off this series, but it is superb. So if you've hesitated in reading it, get through the first two. The third one's better, and for me, they just got better and better as we've gone through. But yeah, the Half-Blood Prince is my best favourite so far. In 8th spot, we have another series, and that is the Three Body Problem series. I've spoken about this a few times. My favourite of the series is the second book, The Dark Forest. But this is... I don't want to say too much about the series, especially later books, but this is a fantastic sci-fi, big ideas, hard classic sci-fi. And we work through these different scenarios, and the scale just grows and grows and grows and just becomes this vast, enormous, epic scale, which is handled well. There are, this is not no series ever perfect. It's not a perfect series. There's some character challenges, but that's sort of classic sci-fi. Generally, a lot of it has, the ideas over character development, and this is in that style again, where the ideas are more important than necessarily the characters and the character development. The characters drive the plot and the ideas and the exploration of ideas, and some of the ideas are fascinating. So for me, the Dark Forest one was the most fascinating, but all three are excellent reads. I just loved the scope, the size of ideas, the way it made me think and see the universe in a slightly different light. And yeah, I mean, what more can you ask from a sci-fi series when it makes you see the universe in a slightly different light? Absolutely superb. I say Dark Forest is my favourite. Three Body Problem was good. Death's End was great. Read them. If you haven't read them already, read them. They are brilliant, classic, hard sci-fi, really, but with a, I suppose, modern twist and just epic scope. So another change of genre. We're going to horror, and I read my first Stephen King last year, 2023. That was Pet Sematary. Stephen King's writing, as many of you will know, is just fabulous. It's so engaging, and the characters you just feel with. I felt so connected to the dad Lewis in this book and his storyline, and this is sort of an exploration of grief and loss and kind of what not to do, I suppose, in a sense, in grief and loss. But it's just so well executed, and it's a level of paranormal within it, but it just adds to the tension, the creepiness, the fear. It does deal with some real core fears that I've actually have and have had, and I think, reading it as, if I'd read this previously, I think it would still been previous to becoming a father, so I think this would still been incredibly creepy and, anxiety ridden. But this is, reading it now with a young son, it just elevates that tension and that fear to another level. And yeah, I'd stop reading this at night and start reading it just in the daytime, because my mind would just disappear off into thoughts that weren't that conducive to sleeping. Excellent Stephen King novel. So in 6th place, we have another book that again deals with grief and loss and exploration, but very different from Pet Sematary. This is Pearl by Sian Hughes. So this was longlisted for the Booker Prize, I believe. And it is about a young girl who becomes a lady as the story develops, and her mother leaves when she's very young, or goes missing, disappears when she's very young, and it's her dealing with that grief and loss and her life following such a traumatic event where, we believe the mother's died, but there's no body, there's no closure, and it's how that impacts on her life going forward, through her schooling, through her, just every part of her life, her relationships, and what relationships she forms, how she forms them, can she, how well she forms them. It was heartrending, it was beautiful, it's quite literally flowery. I think Sian Hughes is a poet as well. So it certainly had that beautiful flowing prose, and it was just magnificent. It made me feel it. It made me tear up. It was just a beautifully told story, and I was lost in the pages of this book. I haven't got a copy. I borrowed it from the library, and yeah, it made me feel so much, just dealing with that grief and loss, and just magnificent. If you like literary fiction, probably on the more flowery side, but looking at grief and loss and that study of, you know, how people overcome that, and if they can, and how the relationships do, and the ending of it was just magnificent. So, Pearl by Sian Hughes. Right, for number 5, we're going to completely shift again, and we're going to move to crime or thriller, and that is the Millennium Trilogy by Stieg Larsson. These 3 books I read this year, and all 3 were excellent, but my favourite was the third in the trilogy, The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest. Now, considering this was, the idea Stieg Larsson had was it's going to be a 10 book sort of magnum opus, and he only wrote 3 and then sadly passed away, and these were all released after his death. This is the third, in theory, the third book of 10. Just completes the trilogy so well. It's such a satisfying conclusion to the trilogy. It is absolutely superb. I mean, I was not quite literally, but, you know, fist pumping the air internally, if not actually externally, at what happens in this book. It is magnificent. But I'll try not to talk about too much about this book, but this is my favourite. But this series, we've got 2 main characters. We've got Mikael Blomqvist, who's a journalist, and we've got Lisbeth Salander, who is a hacker, and has had a troubled childhood and upbringing, and, you know, there's a lot of fallout from that in the way she is and the way she forms or doesn't form relationships, but it's their partnership as they, you know, uncover mysteries and do investigative journalism. He does investigative journalism, she supports him, and we discover more. So this is sort of them meeting, and I suppose their first case, really. And then we get more into these 2 sort of flow as one story, and we get a lot more of Lisbeth Salander and her background, her backstory, and who she is and why she's who she is. And I just can't I struggle to explain how satisfying this conclusion actually was to this story. It was magnificent, absolutely superb. One of the, you know, such a fabulous conclusion to the story. So if you haven't read it, this trilogy is brilliant. I know there's a 4th book written by a different author, but I don't think anything's going to beat this, for me, this ending to this trilogy. So I'm not going to read on, but please read it. If you like crime, if you like thriller, if you've not picked up this one, I'm sure you have, because it is one of the more popular ones. Absolutely superb. It's you know, it is a real shame that Larsson died young and before we got any further, but these 3 books are just superb, absolutely superb. Okay, number 4, we're getting back to fantasy, and this time we're going epic fantasy, and that is The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. So this was the second book I was reading in January. I was finishing off with Wrath in January. This series is just a magnificent example of multi-point of view, pure epic fantasy at its absolute best, and it's superb. It gives you everything you want. Yet there's no end of tropes in it. You've got prophecy, you've got village boy made good, you've got animal companions, you've got found family, you've got tropes galore, but they're all executed so well. I mean, does it, you know, I've heard people say it doesn't really do anything new to the epic fantasy genre. It probably doesn't do anything new, but what it does so well. And John Gwynne's writing, it gets better as it goes along. But this, so if you take Wrath, for instance, his use of multi-point of views to tell the story just works seamlessly. And what he does is he doesn't tell the same thing from different points of view. Every point of view progresses the story. It does do all of them. To be fair, it does do all of them. I think it's most noticeable probably in this one because, it's the conclusion, so lots of things are coming together. But he uses that structure so well to continue to progress the story. Some multi-POVs you get where you're rehashing or re-seeing the same events from different angles, and that can be really effective. But this one, it's the one storyline or multiple storylines, but they're all progressing through different different points of view. And it's just superbly written, and it is a fabulous classic fantasy. As to which is my favourite, honestly, it's really, really difficult. It's either Valor or Ruin, I'm going to say. I mean, the conclusion is also superb. I'm going to give it to Valor, the second book. I think this, for me, the first book was good. It was solid start. Valor just stepped it up to another level, and then that continued to the next two books. There's such emotional gut punches and reveals in this second book. It just elevates this epic fantasy story to another level. It's magnificent. I need to read more John Gwynne, and there's Of Blood and Bone, which is set again in the Banished Lands here, but into the future. But if you love, I don't want to say stereotypical fantasy, but if you love, your good versus evil fantasy, know who you're rooting for, and want to see how this story concludes with a bit of extra darkness, that's what it does. It does deliver that sort of the dark element. Your characters aren't always safe that you hope are safe. So yeah, just well done, John. Absolutely superb. I will read more of your work. Where to put this now? Okay, let's put it down here. Okay, so we're into the top three, the three best books I read this year. And at number 3, again, another complete change of pace. And this was probably the biggest surprise for me last year. And that was Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. So I started reading classics last year. I think I read 5 or 6 in the end. This blew me away. And it's... I think I went in with the wrong expectations. I thought I went in with the sort of the romance love story angle. And there is, a romance love story. There's... I suppose it's the archetypal pinnacle of enemy to lovers storyline, but it's executed so well. And what it does, or what Jane Austen does superbly, is the humour she interweaves into the story is just remarkable. I was surprised by how much I was smiling and chuckling as I was reading this book. The social commentary, the views espoused by some of the characters, the way she tells the story. It was an absolute delight, and I was blown away by how much joy it brought me to read this book. I really didn't expect it. Yes, I know I've heard so many people tell me how good this story is, and I should listen to them more, absolutely. But I had this expectation of this romance story, but reading it and the way it's told, and just the humour. I think the humour just absolutely got me, and the social commentary, and it's so much more, and it's superb. I'm reading more Jane Austen. I've got certainly 1, if not 2, that I want to try and get to next year, probably in Jane Austen July. But superb. Number 3 in the book. Number 3 on my list, sorry. Absolutely superb. Jane Austen. Right, so the top 2, this was really, really hard, and it switched back and forth a lot. But we're going to do it now, and we're going to tell you what they are. So at number 2, I've got Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This is fantasy. There's a mystery involved in this story, but what really got me is the atmosphere that Susanna Clarke creates, and she just creates this environment, this house, and it's stairs, and it's sort of alcoves, and it's statues, and the water that fills this house, and the house is the world, and there is just the house and Piranesi within that, exploring it, and travelling between the different floors and rooms, and seeing the different statues, and the birds that visit. I was lost in this house, and I've thought about this house so often throughout the year, because I read this fairly early on in the year. I've thought about this house so often throughout the year. It's just mesmerising, the atmosphere she has created that has stuck with me throughout this year. And the mystery in the storyline is is really good, and it twists and it turns, and you've got Piranesi based in his house, and you see it all through his journal entries, and how his views change. And there's only really one other character in the house, and he's called the Stranger, and he's only there every so often. And we start to build an understanding what the house is, where the house is, how this house exists, all through the eyes of, this inhabitant of the house, is Piranesi, and it's just magnificently told. It's probably one of the strangest books I've read because it is so unique in its telling. But yeah, it is an exquisite read, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's just stuck with me the whole year, so it had to be near the top of this list. But it doesn't quite make the #1 spot. So at #1, I don't have a physical copy of this because I listened to it, and I encourage everybody to listen to it if you can, and that is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This was my favourite read of the year. It was beautiful, it's sci-fi. I don't want to tell you too much about the story because you really want to go in as blind as possible, but it is such a magnificent sci-fi story. We've got an individual waking up groggily in a bed, doesn't know where he is, doesn't know who he is, doesn't know what he's doing, where he is, and he then uncovers this extraordinary adventure that he's on. Extraordinary expedition that he's on. And what really got me is the humour is just really hit hard, and I was laughing out loud at various points, embarrassingly in public while listening to this. But it's just magnificent. It's got loads of science in it, but it's much more about the characters, and the science is told in an engaging way. You don't get huge amounts of exposition within this. It's more about the characters and character development, and the science is told within that. But this has one of the best relationships in sci-fi that I've come across, and it's just magnificent, and it is elevated by the audio, and Ray Porter's audio just elevates it to another level, and that relationship is just beautiful, and it's going to stick with me for a long time. I can hear myself. I can definitely see myself listening to this several times again in the future. Whether I'll actually have to physically read it, I don't know whether I will, to be honest. I think I'll just listen to it, but it was beautiful. It was magnificent. It's funny. There's loads of science in there. Andy Weir is probably more famous for The Martian, and obviously that was made the Matt Damon film. This has that level of humour. The science goes maybe further. It's maybe bigger in scope, and maybe a bit more further away from realism, or a bit more expansive in its science. Just superb. And I say, if you can get the audio, please do listen to the audio, because for me it is the way to really get the most out of this book. Just fantastic. And there we have it. There's my top 10 for 2023. It's been a hell of a year. I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. Can't wait to really get stuck into 2024 now. I've got some hopefully even better reads ahead of me over the next 12 months, but we will see how it goes. Let me know what your favourite books were in 2023, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.